Howdy, and welcome to my Service Learning Portfolio by Ryan Kamistek. I did my service learning at College Station High School in their game design development class. This is a fairly new course, and it's taught by a coach who is currently pursuing his master's in game design development. So, the class isn't necessarily figured out in terms of having a strict regimen of topics to be handled, and most of the coursework is done via project. So in my service learning, I taught in the game design development classroom, mostly coaching the students on how to make their projects better, and this included game design, which is how to take the raw ideas of what you have about a game and turn them into mechanics that would be fun. And game development is taking those ideas and turning it into an actual game that you can play, so the programming and the artwork that actually goes into the final project. The students in my classroom did not diverge along gender or racial boundaries because they were all primarily white males. This was caused primarily by two things: the prevalence of video games among male, because it is seen as acceptable for males to play video games where it is not for females, and also the necessary technical requirements for the class are large. Students already need to know how to program using various programming languages and use game engines, or how to use Photoshop and 3D modeling tools prior to entering into the class. Because of this technical requirement, there's a strong bias towards upper class white males who can spend the time and money to develop those skills already. Although in the class there are also two primary groups that I noticed: students that take the class every year and have already learned the technical skills to compete in competitions and make quality games, and those who were just placed in the class by counselors and don't have the same skills as the former group. The students that participate in the class are generally the ones of the first group, and the ones that just kind of sit around and don't really do what the teacher tells them to do are generally from the second group. These two groups don't necessarily discriminate towards each other overtly, but occasionally there's some name calling or some practical jokes between the two groups, which leads me to believe there is at least some subliminal discrepancy between them. The class organization of my course was largely bureaucratic. In terms of the entire school system, it's extremely hierarchical, with principal and student superintendents sitting at the top of their respective organizations, with administrators and department heads leading down to the teacher and then finally the students. Because of that, there's pretty high bureaucratic requirements for the course. Even since this is an elective, he still has to take attendance and provide some basis of grading and feedback to the students to show that they're making improvements on learning the skills of game development and game design. My interest for working with the game design development course was primarily because I work at the Live Lab. The Live Lab is a research lab focused on making educational video games, and because of my knowledge and work there, I felt that I could make a difference with the students and teach them something that I'm passionate about. My service learning directly relates to my major and career goals because I am a computer science major currently working at Game Design Development Research Lab. So, in my service learning, I'm able to talk with the high school students and get the opportunity to share what college is like, how the computer science major works, and what working in the game design and development field feels like. Also, the experience gave me the opportunity to teach less technically skilled people about programming, which will be a skill I'll need when working with business people or sociologists in the future. While I didn't really have a philosophical motivation for helping in the class, I think it would have been something that I really would have liked to have in my high school. I would have loved to have someone to come in and talk with us about our projects and how we can improve things, and what the next steps were for a career in game development or computer science. For what I actually did while I was teaching the course, I was mostly teaching students how to program, which is taking the actual code that they write and applying that to game logic that they want to be in their game. For example, I had one of the students wanted to make a Pong-like thing, but instead of it just going up and down, he wanted to go around the inside of a sphere. So I had to teach him not only how to code the thing, but also how to do the the linear algebra to make that particular operation work. Next, I had to teach them pretty vaguely about how to use game engines, because they could already figure this out on their own. Game engines are pretty visual in how they are, and they're usually pretty easy to learn about. And then the last and probably most challenging thing I had to teach the students about was basically software engineering. So how to plan out their projects, how to set aside time to do design work, to actually make the game, and then to reflect on what they did and improve on that in iterative cycles. From this experience, I've learned a few things. First is that managing student interest, or in more general, interest of individuals, is very difficult when they are forced into a situation. The students that were placed in the class by counselors tended to do nothing and ignore any advice the teacher gave them. However, they seemed to listen to me much more favorably, probably because I was unrelated to the bureaucracy that forced them to be there. Another thing I learned from the experience was that since the students didn't want to be in the class or participate, they either knowingly or unknowingly created a subculture. They had a large enough group that the teacher couldn't effectively keep an eye on all of them, so while some members had to pretend to be doing work, others could do what they pleased. In general, the students wanted to learn. However, they had issues with the bureaucracy. They felt that it only existed to keep them busy, which was very strange, considering how open-ended the class actually was. The reality was that the students became deviant because they were forced into the class and rejected its norms and values. But when I came, they forgot about the bureaucracy and let me help them. This is interesting for society in general, because in this case they were deviant not because they hated the norms and values of society, but because they were wronged by the system and rebelled in their own way.